Exam proctors over it. What is the most elaborate attempt at cheating that you've witnessed? A teacher I worked with had this happen. She had a female student make tiny cheat sheets and then she put them on the inside of her bra. When she wanted to read the sheets she would kind of lean and squeeze her breasts together and look down. She was caught and said that she knew that she shouldn't have tried it with a female teacher. How on earth would you explain this to your boss? I was looking at a -T and she kept squeezing them, so I wanted to know more. I'd just leave the kid be rather than explain that NGL. At the test center I used to work, candidates were allowed to bring a translator of their choice as long as it got approved by the state. Most of the time it was a family member and we would listen in on the conversation using a headset and record it. Once in a while, while replaying the recordings, we would hear signals and patterns given by the translator telling the candidate which option to choose. Busted. Not an exam proctor, but a student who heard of this afterwards. It was two girls, and the one who knew the answers sat behind the other. During the test, she started braiding the other girl's hair. When the teacher wasn't looking, the one in the front would make a number with her fingers on the side of her thigh, the question, and the other responded by pulling her hair on specific spots, A, B, C, D. They made a habit of braiding each other's hair every day days before the exam so the teacher wouldn't find it weird. I was the goody two shoes who never cheated, but even I had to respect them. Ratatouille eye roll. For the German equivalent of the SAT, you get an English dictionary fused during the English exam provided by the school. Someone in my year bought the one used by the school, cut the cover off and glued it onto a German English dictionary. The school found out when they tried to jam 11 books into the shelf space for 10 books after the exam. The culprit wasn't found. Kind of looking forward to the 20-year anniversary. I want this mystery solved. Brilliant. I have a lot of freckles on my arm, which would turn lighter if I put pressure on the skin, which gave me an idea. If I used a marker with a similar color as my freckles, I could make dots that formed letters or numbers, and when I pressed my arm just right, the freckles would fade for a second or two, but the ink would remain dark. Couldn't write a lot like this, but enough for notes on more difficult concepts. Never got caught. This is next level. I'm not an examiner, but my mate once wrote out loads of notes on his thighs, then went to the toilet during the exam. The examiner led him to the toilet to check the cubicle out first etc, then waited to listen for papers rustling etc. He wasn't very smart, but that could well be the smartest idea he's ever come up with. Absolutely do not condone though. The exams I have taken will allow a break, but you are not allowed to go backwards in the questions, so no answers to that point may be changed. In high school, circa 1996, I somehow obtained the answers to a 20-question test. I proceeded to go to the computer lab and type the answers and then printed them in size 3 font. Then I cut them out and taped them on one side of a white Bic pen. During the test I could roll the pen so the answers weren't visible, and then when I need to look I could tilt the pen slightly and see the answer. I missed 2 on purpose so the teacher wouldn't figure I cheated. She might have assumed you cheated, but there would be no full evidence, bro. You could have aced it. The proctor didn't catch me, or they didn't care. I wrote the answers on my desk the day before using the pencil eraser. If I tilted my head the right way so that the light was shining on my desk, I could read the answers, but that was the only way you could see them. Not a proctor, but in high school teachers always had stuff on construction paper on all the walls, little sayings, etc. They never thought to check them to see if someone had modified them the day before the test with notes, and if discovered, they were visible by all. Nothing to tie to whoever did it. This reminded of a test in 1st grade. We had to write the name of our state for one of the answers. I could not for the life of me remember how to spell Kansas. Then I saw the state flag hanging above the chalkboard. Got the answer right. I think that's the most cheating I've done on a test. I used to write answers on a transparent pad. The fact is, on a transparent pad, I wrote answers with a pencil, lightly. It will only be visible when a certain amount or type of reflection flashes on it. Did it for 3 years straight. The teachers always checked the pad of the person with the opaque one. They never checked mine. Not an exam proctor, but two of my classmates in an undergraduate chemistry class wrote out pages of notes and stuck them in boots that they wore on exam day. They went to the bathroom during the test to cheat off their notes. No one suspected a thing even though it was like a 90-degree Florida day. I only found out after they bragged about it to a couple of people later. Not very elaborate, but I used to very lightly write equations on my fingernails in pencil before math tests. At the start of the test I'd immediately write them down on my test packet, which wasn't unusual. We were encouraged to write them down first so we wouldn't get nervous and mess them up, then wipe off my fingernail with another finger. Oh, I did this too. I used it for both math and French class. Not a proctor, but I knew a guy who would make his own labels for soda water bottles, but change the nutrition info to be useful equations for the test. The label's material was identical to regular ones, even down to the gloss of the paper. Seems like if he spent the time studying, instead of making perfect labels for cheating, he wouldn't need the labels in the first place. He never got caught as far as I know. One of my friends wrote down all the answers on her arm. Her little brother came out, thought she had a tattoo, and then when the mom checked it was the answers for math. I was proctoring a common exam for 5 different lecture sections. A male student came in and attempted to take the exam for his girlfriend. One had to scan their ID to be issued an exam. He scanned his girlfriend's ID and then claimed he was a transman who had recently transitioned. LOL. Such a low effort scheme. Guy came in to sit an exam, along with 1 or 2 dozen others, wearing an eye patch and with one arm in a sling with a prosthetic hand. Pretty unusual, but whatever. But I got suspicious when he started fiddling with his eye patch, pulling it way away from his face and then putting it back. So I pressed the button on my desk that turns the cameras on. Not sure why they didn't just record all the time, but this was back in the mid-80s. I wasn't actually supposed to intervene in these cases, so I just sat there and watched, astounded, as this guy proceeded to pull little slips of paper from all over the place, the sleeve of his supposedly injured arm, under his tongue. Incredible. I don't know how he fooled himself into thinking nobody would notice. Throughout high school and university I wrote whatever I needed on the inside glass of my watch. Never caught. Smartwatches probably ruined this one for the new generation. Sadly, as someone with a terrible memory I just viewed this as evening the playing field. Not me, but I once read a story from a kid who was able to get a copy of the multiple choice test. The kid was in band and could read sheet music, so he just transcribed the answers to the test as musical notes. When the teacher told them to clear their desks for the test, he put his books on the floor with the sheet music on top. I was invigilating an exam once. A kid wrote an answer on an eraser and passed it to his friend. I intercepted the eraser and slid it out of its paper jacket. It had a value written on it. I called the 2 students out and told them to decide amongst themselves who was going to take the fall and get disqualified and the other goes scot-free. Divide and rule. Also, I didn't check people as thoroughly as I could have because I would be giving them more ideas of hiding places. I reminded the students that I had graduated high school and college, so had a few years of experience with exams over them. My friend braided her earphones into her hair and had recorded her written French exam essay, which she then wrote down. Didn't get caught. Have mad respect for people who cheat the crappy exam system. And I'm a teacher. Hahaha, I remember when AirPods were announced, all my Muslim friends made jokes about how hijabis were about to shoot to the top of every class they were in. I used to do the old headphone in sleeve head in hands trick, but never for exams. I was just bored in history class and wanted to listen to Fall Out Boy. Not a proctor, but when I was in high school one of my teachers allowed us to have drinks like sodas during tests. Since I had Photoshop skills at the time, I made a cheat sheet disguised as the nutrition label thinking nobody reads those things and replaced the label on my Coke. But since I spent so much time finding info to put on the label and formatting it, I ended up not needing LOL. Pretty much studied for the test and making it. I referenced it like twice and ended up doing well. Never got caught though. This is the genius of exams that allow handwritten notes. Students think they're being geniuses by cheating by writing down notes on absolutely everything that could be on the test, but you're actually being tricked into studying. In high school I had an elective guitar class. It was pretty much a period where we all just messed around on guitars with friends. But for our final we had to perform a number of chords and scales that nobody had learned the entire semester. I took an index card, wrote out the chords and scales, put tape on the back of the card and fished it behind the strings and attached it to the inside of the guitar. To the teacher it looked like I was looking down focusing on my strings, but I was actually looking beyond the strings at this card that had all the scales on it, passed with flying colors. I'm not an examinator, but I remember seeing a video about copying the label of a Coca-Cola label and edit it on a computer and put the answers on the table of nutritional facts. I think it would have worked, as long as you would be allowed to bring drinks for exams. If they didn't allow sodas, then you could probably pull that off with a plastic water bottle, which is probably more passable than a soda ink. Laser pointer on the marker board with each corner corresponding to the ABCD answers was the most elaborate one I've ever heard of. OMG. Once when I was proctoring an exam at an undergrad TAE, a girl was wearing heavily ripped jeans. She'd written notes on her legs between the rips, like where there was still fabric remaining. I actually was not the one who noticed it, it was a male TAE, but I was the one who had to confront her about it as the only female proctor in the room. I'm pretty sure it was her first offense, so I think all that came of it was an F in the course, but to this day I remember being like, notes on her legs? What? When the other TAE told me she would have got away with it if he wasn't particularly quiet when he walked around. She didn't hear him making the rounds behind her. There is a story from Caltech about a physics student who tried to reinterpret the rules for a take-home exam. There were some textbooks that you were allowed to use, but the rules mentioned them by the authors' names. It said that they could use Feynman, so instead of getting Feynman's physics textbook, the student went and got Feynman himself. The student suffered through an exhausting exam where Feynman gave the student no answers but asked them lots of questions to lead in the right direction. I saw a few COs take their time on a sergeant's exam, and walking by they would be pretty slow at answering the questions. However, when I got to the front of the row, they mysteriously had several answers filled out while the guy next to them is just plugging away like normal. Yeah, we know what you're doing, buddy. PS. On a side note, this was done at a high school, and after the exam was done we collected the test and heard a huge bang outside the room, followed by "oh crap." Apparently, the custodial staff were working and one of the guys was flying through the area in the golf cart and hit one of the poles on campus. It was extremely hard to not laugh as the guy is holding his knee in pain, while we asked him if he needed help. Not a proctor, but a bachelor student at the time. We had a Cisco exam on the school computers. There was one group who blatantly took pictures of the questions and sent them to their friends with their phone. How these guys actually finished their bachelors actually baffles me. They always knew jack crap about the course. In high school, during a computer science programming exam, a buddy and I, instead of working on the assignment, we cracked the school's server wide open to get the pre-approved code for the test. Now, here is the catch, and why we were the most evil buttholes, even by our own admission. We then went ahead to distribute the code for the rest of the class, then used the remaining time to write the code ourselves. We were leagues ahead of the class, so it was not even a challenge or a race against time. I did it quite comfortably. We both got A's, but almost everyone else failed for cheating. Only a few had the brains to make a few modifications to not be so obvious. The rest didn't even bother to change the variable names. My pal and I never got caught. The rest of the cheaters in the class seemed to be freaking stupid. Summer school 7 AM to 11 PM and 1 4 PM calculus sessions with the same professor were the same class including the same test. The afternoon class started pooling money and buying the exam notes, including answers, of the morning exam from a very intelligent entrepreneur. He made a killing that summer. The afternoon session aced that class. This was during our 10-hour art exams. I heard about one student a few years older than me who used his iPod to iMessage. Phones weren't allowed, but iPods and music players were. His parent, who was an art teacher to see if he did everything right, got caught. Then for my exams we weren't allowed any music for 5 hours over 2 days. It was so crap. The silence was awful and off-putting as we would often talk or listen to music during our art lessons. Not a proctor. My friend came up with the realization that you can slip a paper into your mask and then pull it to see what you wrote. I work as a proctor and yes, this possibility has occurred to us. Please take your mask off and show both sides to me. Oh lord, my inner dyslexic thought the headline read proctology exams, and I wondered how the heck do you cheat at those? You have to be really cheeky. Physics teacher had posters with little equations and numbers and things on the walls around the room. Never noticed when one new sheet with certain relevant equations appeared in a rarely used part of the room not easily visible from his desk. Not a proctor. But what I used to do, for multiple choice questions, I'd signal to a friend using hand gestures, like one downward thumb, meaning start at first and tell me all, and the friend would touch their forehead, nose, lips or chin for A, B, C or D while I'm looking in their direction. We'd do it in bursts of 5, so I'd look over, he'd tell me 5 answers, I'll mark them on my sheet and look back at him to receive the next 5. In high school I had a teacher that would leave previous classes graded tests on her desk and would go on break before my class. The door was always open so I was able to get the answers with no issues but needed a way to access them during the test. I noticed a lot of people had notebooks with pictures or drawings on the front cover, so I decided to draw an overly elaborate picture to hide answers in. It was multiple choice true or false, so I made 6 different symbols that represented A, B, C, D, true, false, and wrote them in descending order. I did this once a week for a year, and although I don't understand Spanish, guess who passed the class with flying colors? I'm a teacher now and I know what to look for because I cheated my way through college. My proudest cheat. Had to take our laptops to class to take an online exam that would close if you opened any other screens while the test was open. Made my background a collage of photos of my notes. Got an A. Learn multiple languages and transliterate the answers in each. Example, write the answers in Spanish but write it out in Thai alphabet. Not an exam invigilator, but in my friend's anatomy exam, there was a section on analyzing and identifying tissues based on microscopic slides. Some students had stolen a box and kept slides on them which they had revised. So come the exam, when the teacher hands them the slide for assessment, they just switched it out for the ones they smuggled in and passed. There was a case at my high school where 2 students on opposite ends of the room blinked Morse code to each other. They were caught and had to wear sunglasses for the rest of the tests. That's a lot of blinking. I do like pen wobbling. If I knew Morse code or cared to cheat. Not a proctor, but here it is. I'm well aware this will sound like bulls, but it's mighty true. In year 9 we had mocks. I was with the smart group of friends, but a mate of ours was on the spectrum and was hopeless with maths. So my other mate found a Morse thing online, gave him one of his Bluetooth headphones to hide in his sleeve, and Morsed him some answers through his phone in his pocket. Both were reasonably proficient at Morse code, they'd both been learning since year 5. He set the frequency really high so it was hard to hear for older teachers, but they had to stop when teachers started suspecting something since other students were trying to find the source of said noise. I am not an exam proctor, so I'm technically violating the rules, but I'm only violating by proxy as I heard these from an exam proctor at the community college I attend, and I don't think they have a Reddit account. These aren't exactly cheating attempts as they didn't say anyone tried to do them. It's just I assumed that way as rules are there for a reason. 1. No lip balm allowed in the testing center because someone might smuggle in a cheat sheet for exams which they are not allowed for on the inside of a fake label. 2. If you absolutely need to have music during a test, it has to be a specific Pandora station. You can choose, it's just you have to choose from existing genre ones. Listen to on a testing center owned iPad. Otherwise, if you want to listen to music on your iPod iPhone, you have to bring it in at some point before the test so the people in the testing center can listen to every song in your library, as for all they know you might have somehow stolen the answers, recorded yourself saying them before returning them, and put that track on your music player disguised as some current hit or at least something that wouldn't be out of place, aka why they have to listen. You can't just show them a list of what's in your library. Track names aren't necessarily descriptive of contents. That second one seems intense. I can't imagine staff having the time to listen to every single track on a student's device. One time 4 football players arrived late for an exam. They all ran in, out of breath and disheveled. Told me a tale about getting a flat on the highway and getting here as fast as they could. They knew that I had another class and then free period, when I'd be able to administer a retake. I also knew that their teammates who had taken the test would be able to tip them off as to the contents and they'd have 3 hours to cram. So the free period came, and I separated them into 4 rooms so they couldn't cheat any further, but I had the exam, face down on the desk, waiting for them to begin. When they flipped it over I had written them a note: "Boys, sorry for the emergency today. I know how stressed you probably are. So I decided to cut 49 of the 50 questions out, and your whole exam score will be based on one multiple choice question. Which tire?" I think the first time I heard this one was like 1989. Once in secondary school we were desperate as hardly anyone studied for a history test. Nobody prepared cheat sheets either. I came up with the idea of using psychological warfare. We had all the classes in the same classroom, so we were allowed to stay inside for the break. I noticed that the teachers mostly didn't care to look at the blackboard until they needed it, so I proposed that we write some key dates on the blackboard, banking on the likelihood that the teacher will just walk past it and sit down at her desk. It worked like a charm. Until she asks, "Why are you all looking at the blackboard?" Then she stood up and looked at it. She was so amused that she decided to wipe it down. But let us continue. Still makes me laugh. Not a teacher, but a teacher once told me they stopped allowing students to borrow pens because they'd write answers on bits of paper and wrap it around the ink tube of their pens and put it back in the pen case, and that's how they cheated. Back in Latin class, at one point, we were allowed dictionaries, traditionally bought from the people in the year above us to save money on buying them new. One day in class, I noticed that the guy I bought it from had meticulously written notes into an empty margin in a way that looked like it could be part of the actual dictionary from afar. I memorized the page number. I actually recently remembered this when, before a university exam with supervision via Zoom, the proctor asked the non-native speakers to hold up the dictionary they were allowed to look for bookmarks or cheat sheets. And I was just thinking, man, only an idiot would have a cheat sheet sticking out of the dictionary instead of using the dictionary itself. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.